How much do you believe in your own unique competence and your own capability to do what it takes brick by brick to build that? And he said, 10 out of 10. I know I can do that. I said, awesome. On a scale of 1 to 10, how much do you feel in your heart, in your soul, in your ego, in your emotions that you deserve the amazing results that would come with all of the success that you created? And he looked at me and said, no. And I said, what's the number? And he said, maybe 2 out of 10. And I said, I know you think you have low self-belief, but I do believe this is a self-worth issue, my friend.
Welcome to the Radical Health Rebel podcast. I'm your host, Lee Brandon. This work started for me several decades ago when I started to see the impact I could make on people, helping them to identify the root cause of their health problems that no doctor could figure out, including serious back, knee, shoulder and neck injuries, acne and eczema issues, severe gut health problems, even helping couples get pregnant after several IVF treatments had failed. And it really moves me to be able to help people in this way. And that is why I do what I do and why we have this show. In this week's episode, entitled The Importance of Consistency and Habits, I spoke with Kevin Palmieri, the founder and co-host of the Next Level University podcast. Early in his life, Kevin found success, but after a brush with near suicide, he realized he wasn't living the life he truly wanted. Kevin then became passionate about self-improvement, which is evident in this episode, and he decided to make his purpose in life to impact as many people as possible by becoming a role model podcaster and speaker. Kevin has now hosted over 1,200 podcast episodes and has taken his life to the next level, achieving both personal and professional success. I really enjoyed speaking with Kevin in this episode, and I'm sure you're going to enjoy what he has to say too. Kevin Palmieri, welcome to the Radical Health Rebel podcast. Thanks for coming on the show.
Absolutely, Lee. Thank you so very much for having me. I'm excited to chat, my friend.
Yeah, it's great to have you here. And Kevin, to kick things off, could you share with the audience an overview of your life's journey so far, your brush with suicide, and what led you to find your purpose in life?
So I was raised in a household by my mom and my grandmother. I didn't know my father. I didn't meet my dad until I was 27, with the understanding that this man is supposed to be your father. So obviously that plays a role in a young man's life, and it's playing a role in the life I have today as well. Other than that, childhood fairly normal, all things considered. But things really started to shift for me, Lee, when I was in high school, because although I had zero clue what I wanted to do with my life, I knew college wasn't the route. It just didn't make sense to go invest money to get somebody to help me to find out what I want to do. So I started the very humbling journey of working a bunch of odd jobs, and I was a gas station attendant. I cleaned bathrooms and floors at a hospital, personal trainer, truck driver, forklift operator, construction, on-call firefighter for a very short time, many things, just trying to figure it out. But in my early 20s, I got this very interesting opportunity in an industry called weatherization. And it was our job to go into large buildings, usually schools, stuff like that, and to make the buildings more energy efficient. So cool. I've never done this before, but I went from making $15 an hour to $60 an hour. I'm in. This was my first real look into external success does not create internal fulfillment. But I didn't learn the lesson very fast because I just thought, well, I'm depressed, I'm anxious, whatever, more money will fix that. So eventually it got to the point where I had gotten a promotion and I was a foreman and I was really crushing it. I had just won a bodybuilding show. I was dating someone who was a model. I had a sports car. I had all these amazing things. But I was the most depressed, the most anxious, the most insecure that I had ever been. My partner ended up leaving me because I was so insecurely that she wanted to move to California. We were talking about California earlier. And we lived on the East Coast. And I was so afraid if she moved out there without me, she'd find someone else. She'd leave me. She'd find someone better. So I unintentionally held her back. I told her not to go. She ended up leaving me as she should have. And that was a rock bottom moment for me. I'm heartbroken. I don't feel good enough. I feel unlovable. So I said, let me just grind my face off and make even more money, and hopefully all these problems will fade away. So that next year, I made $100,000 at 26 with no college degree. And it took me living on the road for 10 months to make that money because most of our contracts were in other states. And I had this really jarring / powerful realization when I opened my final pay stub of the year. And I realized that for most of my life, and especially that year, I'd lived unconsciously. I didn't know why I was doing what I was doing. I was just going with the flow and seeing what happened. I realized that the opposite of unconscious is hyperconscious. So in 2017, I started a podcast called the Hyperconscious Podcast. And that was my first dipping my toe into this. I fell in love with podcasting as I quite literally fell out of love with my job overnight. I've reached the pinnacle. I don't want to do it again. I'm not interested. But podcasting is not paying the bills in the beginning, as most early podcasters know. So every Sunday, I would pack up my bag and I would get in the work van and drive 6, 8, 12, 14 hours to the job site. And I was so homesick because it's not like I get to go home every night. I'm living in this hotel for a week at a time. So my mental health kept getting worse and worse and worse and worse. And eventually I woke up in a hotel room, 5 o'clock in the morning. I sat up, I slid to the edge of the bed. I was lacing up my work boots. And that morning, the best way to explain it is there was 10 televisions on in my head at the same time, and every single one was on a different station. And one is saying you're stuck here forever. People like you do not even get opportunities like this. Never mind leave them behind. If you ever worked up the courage / stupidity to leave, what would your friends think? What would your family think? And what are you going to do with your life? I didn't have a plan A. This kind of was my plan B. There is no plan C. And it was in that moment, Lee, where I thought to myself, if I just take my life, I'll take all my problems with me and there won't be a lot to worry about. Luckily, I am surrounded by amazing people. I have great friends, great wife. I messaged one of my friends who's now my business partner, and I explained to him what was going on. And he said, in his wisdom, Kev, over the last few years, your awareness has changed a ton, but your environments have remained the same. I think it's time for you to change your environment. So 3 or 4 months later, I ended up leaving that job and then going full time into trying to figure out how to make money with a podcast. And I was very broke for several years, and my mental health actually got worse for a short time, but that was in 2018. In 2018, I left corporate, real job, and then I've been podcasting ever since.
So when obviously you say that you had a brush with suicide, how close did that get?
It was mostly the ideation of it, but the problem for me and the fear was that wasn't the first time I had that feeling. I've had those thoughts before where I remember saying to one of my partners in the past, if this is what life is, if life is this dull, gray, colorless experience, I do not want to be here anymore. I don't want to do this forever. I can't do this forever. And I actually ended up going to therapy years before this suicidal ideation happened. So it's something that I thought I outgrew, or I thought it was maybe once in a lifetime thing. And it was more the thought behind it than I didn't necessarily have a plan. I didn't know if or how I was going to do it. But in that moment, it felt as real as humanly possible.
Yeah. So looking back, what do you feel were the contributing factors to feeling that way?
I think now, with the awareness I have, if we were to look at my basic human needs that I value the most, one of them is certainty. I'm a very certainty-driven human being. And the other one is freedom. Freedom to do what I want and be where I want when I want. And I traded both of those in to make as much money as humanly possible, and money's up there too. So it's almost like I traded in all the things that would fulfill me in order to try to find something that I thought was happiness. And then when I realized, oh, all of this external success does not fix internal voids, it's not making me fulfilled, I think I had a moment where I said, oh my goodness, I've lived the last several years of my life wrong, and I don't have anywhere else to go. That was a big piece of it. The other piece of it was I didn't think I would ever make that kind of money again. As somebody who doesn't have a college degree and doesn't really have any skills, That was a big piece of it. And then I think the last big piece of it is so much of my reputation, so much of my significance came from the quote unquote success that I had. I was very, very afraid to start over. I was very, very afraid to look like a failure. I was terrified of being judged for those decisions. And that all weighed very heavily on me. And I was afraid of the judgment that would come with that for sure.
Yeah, it's interesting. One of the words you used was certainty. And I think for most people, uncertainty is quite a scary thing for most people.
It is. But that's the balance of it. Would you rather be certain in the fact that you're not going to be happy, or would you rather be uncertain in the opportunity that you could find happiness somewhere that you haven't found yet? And it took me a long time to get to that point. But yeah, I find that this is a blanket statement, but most emotionally driven humans tend to be certainty driven. Many logically driven humans tend to actually enjoy variety. That's what I've noticed from coaching as many people as we have at this point. So to this day, I'm still very certainty driven, which is why the uncertainty of being a business owner in the beginning was so challenging for me. I didn't know it was going to be like this, right? So that was very humbling. And I was having anxiety attacks and panic attacks, and I had no idea what was going on.
Do you see any connection between people that crave certainty and people that perhaps crave, or should I say, are fearful of change?
Yeah, and I really think the connection between those two is either belief, so lack of belief, or lack of self-worth. I think lack of belief, I'll say inaccurate belief and inaccurate self-worth. I think those are the two root causes of so many of our issues, because if you don't think you're capable of dealing with the uncertainty of change, you're not going to be open to it. When we talk about belief and confidence, I think confidence really is the ability or the understanding or the belief that you can figure it out. It's figure-outable. The confidence to say, I'm going to take a shot at this, and I mean, if I don't figure it out on the first time, it's not that big of a deal. Like, I'll figure it out as I go. Self-worth is, I am deserving of the results that I'm going to create. So if you have low self-belief or low self-worth, you're going to convince yourself that you're not worth trying and you don't deserve the result anyway. Or even if you do try, you're so uncertain that you don't know if you can handle the uncertainty. So I really think those are two of the big pillars to why many of us get stuck. And the reason I say inaccurate self-worth and self-belief, I used to think high self-belief was good. I do think it's good as long as you take action. I used to think high self-worth was good. It is, as long as it's going to create the opportunity for you to take action and you're humble enough to know that you need to. So I think at the end of the day, the goal is to drive to the middle. And when you drive to the middle, you say, I'm very scared of what could happen in this change. I don't know what's going to happen, but I do believe in my own unique ability to figure it out and stay afloat. And I do feel like I deserve whatever it is I'm working for that will come to me through this change.
Yeah, I like that. What I was thinking of as you were speaking then was, obviously, you know, I've been in this business 27 years, and whether it's clients or just people I know, it's quite interesting when you come across someone and you're speaking to them and they're telling you about their health problems. And as you're talking, you can see in their eyes and you can hear in their words that they know what you're telling them is correct, but yet you know that they're not going to follow your advice. And when you said that bit about not being not worthy or not feeling that you're not worthy, that's what came into my head as soon as you said that. And it was almost like a light bulb. It's like, that's one of the reasons why people don't make that change. And that's, again, why I use the word change as well, because in order to improve in any area of life, but obviously my focus is health, you need to have the confidence that you can do it. And, what you've made really clear as well is that you need to believe that you deserve to have that as well.
Yeah. If you want to change, you really need humility, vulnerability, and courage. And it's the humility to say, I need help. Or it's the humility to start small, really. It's the vulnerability to say, I need help and I'm not where I need to be. And it's the courage to take the first step. It really is those three big ones. This is a really good exercise. I've used this with many clients. So I was working with this client one time and I said, I have a very unique test. Let's try this together. I said, what do you want to create? And he said, I want to have a successful podcast and I want to be able to create a successful business from my podcast. I said, awesome. I said, I have two questions for you. On a scale of 1 to 10, how much do you believe in your own unique competence and your own capability to do what it takes brick by brick to build that? And he said, 10 out of 10. I know I can do that. I said, awesome. On a scale of 1 to 10, how much do you feel in your heart, in your soul, in your ego, in your emotions that you deserve the amazing results that would come with all of the success that you created? And he looked at me and said, oh, no. And I said, what's the number? And he said, maybe 2 out of 10.
Wow.
And I said, I know you think you have low self-belief, but I do believe this is a self-worth issue, my friend. You are probably subconsciously sabotaging your own success because you don't feel you deserve it. For a long time, Lee, I thought the fear of failure was the only thing. And then now I've worked with so many people and I understand the fear of success is just as prevalent in certain individuals than the fear of failure. So the fear of success shows up in wanting to stay small, not wanting to be seen. If you resonate with this statement, every time I grow, I get villainized by the people I love, you might have a fear of success. If you resonate with, I'm so afraid not to grow because if I don't grow, I'll be left behind, you might have more of a fear of failure. But that was a really good exercise for me because it allowed me to see in real time that low self-belief often is disguised as low self-worth and vice versa.
Interesting. One of the words that you used is a word that I think can be quite misunderstood. Maybe misunderstood is not the right word, but you'll get what I mean when I tell you which word it was that you said. And that's vulnerability. To me, vulnerability in most situations, I see as a strength. But obviously a lot of people see or perceive being vulnerable as a weakness and that people will take advantage of their weakness. What's your view on vulnerability?
For me, by definition, if doing something is hard and you don't do it because it's challenging, doing it doesn't make it a weakness. I was listening, so in prep for this, I was listening to one of your previous episodes and you had a gentleman on who ran a 4-minute mile or something. And when I heard that, I was like, okay, my goodness. That's something very, very challenging to do. By definition, it is not weak that he can do that. I would say it's extremely strong. I just think that we have this stigma around, if I show my feelings, I'll look weak. When in reality, if you show your feelings, it's a challenging thing to do. Therefore, it's actually more of a strength than you're giving yourself credit for. And I think if we were able to switch that up and reframe that in our minds, we would be more vulnerable. But going back to what we were talking about, transformation, being vulnerable starts with you being vulnerable with yourself. And I don't know how vulnerable you can really be with yourself until you have a high enough level of self-awareness to understand, oh, my ego is protecting me. So I'm 5'4". I am very insecure about my height. Most of my friends are large individuals. That is never something I would be able to say on a public forum like this until I had the self-awareness to say, that's a big insecurity of mine. Let me be vulnerable with myself and let's talk about what that actually means to myself. Okay, cool. I've done that enough times. Now I can say that publicly. So yeah, by definition, if something is challenging to do and you're not doing it because it's challenging, it's not a weakness. It's a strength if you can create the courage and skills necessary to do it.
Mm. Yeah, I see vulnerability as being honest with yourself and the world.
Yeah, it's the truth.
Yeah.
It's the truth.
Yeah.
And this is one of the reasons vulnerability is so important in relationships. If you aren't vulnerable in your relationships, nobody actually knows the real you.
Mm.
And if they don't know the real you, you don't really know the real them. And it becomes this cycle. One of my favorite thoughts is the quality of your relationships is directly connected to the level of vulnerability in them. And I've seen a lot of really successful relationships that work really well because they live in the truth. I've seen a lot of not so successful relationships, and not just intimate relationships, any of them, that don't work well at all because each person is pretending to be someone that they're not. And if you want to find your people and you want to find your group and your energy and your frequency, the only way to find your people is to be yourself. Mm. But when you're pretending to be somebody else, you're not really going to mesh with the people you're around at the level you want, most likely.
Yeah, absolutely. So I know you're a big believer in consistency. Why is consistency so important in life?
It's almost impossible to succeed without it unless you get lucky. I mean, that's the baseline number one. The analogy I always use for this is if Lee and I sat down and Lee said, "Hey, Kev, I'll give you $1 million if you can do the splits." I would say, I might try for $1 million. I might give it a try, but I'm going to need some rehab after that. But if I said, what about 500,000? So I'll save you $500,000. What if I can do the splits at this time next year? Will you give me $500,000? Two things. One, you're probably going to say no because that's a long way away. But two, if I practice every day for the next 365 days consistently, why can't I do the splits? Mm. But if I say, all right, so there's 12 months, I'll practice twice a month. That's only 24 reps. That's not going to be enough. 24 versus 365. So that's a piece of it, right? You're more likely to accomplish something if you do it longer and more intentionally than everyone else. And then I think the big thing that doesn't get touched on as much because it's not necessarily as sexy when it comes to consistency, you're going to learn exponentially more lessons the more consistent you are. So as a podcaster, I've done over 2,000 episodes between our show and other shows, and I've done that consistently over the past 6 years. I just have way more losses, lessons, experiences, perspective, just based on the fact that when you get through level 1, you have lessons from level 1. You might not use those lessons in level 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6. You might use them later. But if you're not consistent, you never get to actually use those powerful lessons you've learned. So consistency becomes a multiplier later. It just takes a long, long, long time. And then here's the last thing. I have talked to many humans about being consistent, and oftentimes they say, well, I'm just not consistent. That's not true. If you weren't consistent, you wouldn't end up gaining 10 pounds a year. You're just consistently overeating. If you weren't consistent, you wouldn't go to bed angry 3 times a week with your partner. You are consistent. It just may be in a detrimental direction. So I think that's an important understanding too, is it's not that you're not consistent. You're just not necessarily consistent in the optimal way to get you the actual results you want. And I think that can be an empowering belief if you use it correctly.
Leah was a 27-year-old who worked in insurance. Leah had never made much of an effort to eat healthily, and she loved chocolate. Before the age of 27, she ate whatever she wanted, and she managed to maintain a very healthy figure and a completely clear skin. So it was a big shock to her when she broke out for the first time in her life, just months away from her wedding. Leah was in a panic because she didn't want bad skin on her wedding day. After testing, it was found that Leah had a minor dysbiosis and a parasite infection that may or may not have been causing health issues, as sometimes parasites can be present without causing problems. I advised Leah on her nutrition and lifestyle and helped improve her gut microbiome. A few months in, there was some but not much improvement in Leah's skin, and she was in a state of panic. At that point, I tested for heavy metals, and it turned out that Leah had very high levels of mercury in her blood. When explaining the potential causes, I mentioned that fish, especially tuna, has mercury in it, and it turns out that Leah had eaten tuna for lunch every day for years. I advised Leah to use liposomal glutathione to help remove the mercury from her blood, and in a matter of weeks, Leah's skin was back to normal. If you would like to achieve the same kind of result as Leah, you can now follow a comprehensive step-by-step guide in my brand new book, Eliminating Adult Acne for Good, available now from all major online bookstores and via my website at www.bodycheck.co.uk/books. Yeah, so I see what you're saying there. So you can be consistent in alignment with your goals,
Mm-hmm.
or you could be consistent in moving away from your goals.
Yeah.
You can't really be in between. It's kind of one or the other.
Yeah, I don't think life has a maintenance mode. Because by definition, time is going by, which means you're either improving or going backwards in a way. Right? If I'm 34 years of age as of now, if I stop doing the level of fitness that I did to get me here, it's going to start trending down. It's just, that's just the law of the universe and the way it works. So yeah, I don't think there really is a maintenance mode, but it's the awareness. It's the awareness in the beginning to say, okay, what results do I want? I want to be healthier. Okay, cool. Every day on the way to work, I stop and I get a coffee and I get a croissant. Okay, I'm very consistent in that behavior. What could I replace that behavior with? Maybe I'll just stop and get a coffee next time. Awesome. And then do that for a week, 2 weeks. Then eventually it gets to the point where maybe you make coffee at home. And then you're just switching and replacing habits. And I think it makes things seem a little bit more doable, right? It's not that you have to build in consistency. It's that you have to pivot to something that, to your point, is in alignment with the goals that you set.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Now, do you feel that people can succeed in life without struggle?
I believe now more than ever that the level of success that you desire determines the level of struggle that you must overcome. I am in a phase of life now where I am the most quote unquote holistically successful I've ever been, but my life is also the most challenging it's ever been. I was in the gym at 5:30 today doing legs, and it was brutal, and I could barely walk up the stairs after. And then I have back-to-back meetings all day, and I'll go to bed tonight, and I will probably make it 5 minutes before I nod off, and that's it for me. My life is the most challenging it's ever been, but my goals determine the level of challenge and struggle I must overcome. So I don't think you can really live a fulfilling, meaningful life without some sort of struggle. I can't imagine that. An easy workout does not create any growth. Also, a day sitting on the couch watching Netflix all day, while it might bring you momentary bouts of happiness, you're most likely not going to get to the end of the day and say, wow, what a fulfilling day that was. I really feel like I did deeply meaningful work. I really feel like I learned so much about myself and understand myself at such a deep level now. I think all of that requires struggle. What I might say now with a new awareness that I didn't have before is you identify struggle. I've had a lot of people say, well, it's not, if you're fulfilled doing it, it's not struggle. Struggle is a perspective. Suffering is a perspective. I'm not that transcendent where I'm at that place that I'm there, but maybe you are. So maybe it's not as much of a struggle, but I do think resistance is required to get to the new level that you're trying to get to. Yes.
Yeah, I certainly feel, the best lessons that any of us learn are generally from mistakes, right?
Yeah.
And it's like, you were talking about the gym. You're not going to build a strong, big muscle without putting it through some struggle, right?
Right.
And,
right.
Talking about, just going to go back to consistency for a moment. So you said you're 34, I'm 54. And I can still lift now what I could lift when I was 34. Possibly slightly more. I was probably at my strongest when I was 27, but I'm probably just below that now at 54, so half my life ago. And I'm just as quick on a tennis court as I was when I was 34. And my goal when I was 40 was to be able to move as well when I'm 70. Now I'm still not slowing down. I'm 54. I can still move very fast on a tennis court. There's no way I would have done that without consistency and without struggle.
For sure. There's a gentleman at my gym. He comes in with his hoodie on, he's got his belt on, he's got his straps on, he's got his beanie on, 77 years old. And he is in there every day, moving weight and trying to get stronger, and just, he's enjoying life. But when I ask him how long he's been doing this, he's like, I couldn't even tell you. Forever. I've been doing it forever. That is the thing. It's almost like as we get older, it gets harder to stay consistent in the things that matter the most. And that's why we stop moving. That's why we stop investing in ourselves. That's why we stop investing in our relationships. I think there's a misunderstanding that as you get older, it's not worth investing in yourself because it doesn't matter as much. When I think it's quite the opposite. When I was 21, I would go out and drink all night and go to the gym and squat 315 for reps without warming up or doing mobility. It was pretty easy to get in shape when I was in my 20s. It is more challenging now than it was before. So if anything, I have to be even more on point. So strong work on that, Lee. You inspired me with that.
Yeah, I was just about to say, if you need to work on things a bit more at 34, just think what it's like in 20 years' time.
Oh, man, I'm hoping technology will come up and it'll make my life easier.
Yeah, one thing that also sprung to mind as well when we talk about struggle, and this is kind of I suppose, a big thing in the health arena at the moment, and that's like hot and cold therapy, right? If you have cold showers, or you take a cold plunge every day. Again, we're talking about consistency, or you're using saunas. You're going through a level of struggle. Some would call it pain.
Yes,
but then it comes with all these benefits. Right, so you've got improved immune system, you've got improved temperature regulation system, and I've noticed since I've been using cold showers and saunas regularly, is that I don't feel the cold as much when it gets really cold in the winter, and B, I don't suffer so much when it gets really hot in the summer. So again, just another example of go through a little bit of struggle for a positive result. One of the terms I often say is short-term pain, long-term gain.
100%.
And you can flip that on its head. Short-term gain normally leads to long-term pain, right? So
yes,
if you're sitting on the sofa and you're eating your croissants every day, okay, you might feel good for 5 minutes until your blood sugar crashes, but in the long term, you're putting on weight, your energy is going to be on the floor, your skin's probably not going to be great, et cetera, right? Whereas if you're doing all the right things, if you're, maybe taking a cold shower every day, if you're getting in a sauna a couple of times a week, you're working out 3 to 5 times a week, you're eating good food every day, then, and again, make it a habit. It doesn't have to be out of the ordinary. So, one of the reasons why this is called the Radical Health Rebel podcast is because most people today think that the things that I would recommend they do to be healthy would be quite radical or rebellious, right? Whereas to me, they're just natural. They are. That's exactly what they are. They are natural. So I completely agree with you that consistency and struggle are very important for success in, I would imagine, any form of life, not just health, but any form of life.
Yeah. I would agree. I think the challenging part of getting and really going through advice that you get is we're in a very weird time where there are people out there that have results. We have no idea how they got them. No clue. And we don't even know if their results are real, but they seem to live a life that is devoid of any struggle. And I'm convinced of this, Lee. I've experienced 2 types of humans in my life. People that are proud of how easy it was versus people that are proud of how hard it was. I am the second kind. That's just the way I'm wired. I do like suffering a little bit. There's just a piece of it that keeps me alive. It makes me feel alive. But I've met a lot of people who say, no, it's super easy. I did it with ease. I was in alignment. I was in flow. And my thought behind that is, but what if it was a little bit harder? Wouldn't you get more results? Just like on the opposite end, if I'm waking up and bashing my head against the wall every day and doing things that are completely opposite of the way I should be doing them, if I was a little bit more in flow and alignment, wouldn't I be more successful? Probably. So I think it really is about driving to 5. It's about working very hard and diligently, but very smart and intellectually. I think that's the sweet spot for all of us. And obviously it's a sliding scale depending on who you are. But again, is there a right answer? I don't know. There's a right answer for you. And the right answer for you is different than the right answer for me, for sure.
Yeah, there's a saying that I really like. And it is, don't judge a man by what he's achieved, but what he's had to overcome to achieve it. Right? So if someone has achieved something and they say, well, that was easy, it's like, well, then you could have achieved so much more. Right? Because, as we said earlier, we all learn from our mistakes. One of the things I love from playing tennis is, to me, tennis is like a microcosm of life. You learn so much on a tennis court that you can apply to everyday life. And one of the things that I often take away from playing a tennis match is that during a tennis match, whether you win or lose, you make so many mistakes. And you have to bounce back psychologically from a mistake. And that's the same thing in life. We hit bumps in the road in life. And we can go one of two ways. We can say, we can catastrophize and feel sorry for ourselves, or we can just dust ourselves down and learn from that experience and go again. Right. So, again, if I, let's say, played a bad shot in tennis, the question in my mind is, well, why? Did I select the right shot? Yes or no? If I didn't, okay, well, next time I'll choose the right shot. If I chose the right shot, but I didn't execute it, so, okay, what do I need to do to execute better? Right. And it's the same thing in life, right? Yeah.
I've always said it's kind of the quarterback mentality. You're across the pond, so maybe the goalie mentality of you're going to it's going to go in the net eventually. Someone's going to get one by you. And there's two thoughts. You either say, oh no, the next one's going to go by me, or, okay, what happened there that I can try to improve on between now and the next time someone fires at me? And I do. Yeah. I think that's a really good understanding for life. Life is hard. It is challenging. It is humbling. You are going to have to overcome stuff. There will be tragedies. There will be tribulations. There will be triumphs. I don't know if there's any other way to do it. And if you want to do something truly amazing with your life, whatever that means to you, you're going to have to overcome all of the resistance holding you back from accomplishing it.
Yeah. I look at my work as a coach, and most of the people I help are people that have been through or are going through the same thing that I've already been through, right? That's called the hero's journey. So, again, my listeners know what I'm about to say, but, I suffered from acne for 18 years, right? But that drove me on to find out what really causes it and what do you really have to do to get over it, because the medical community aren't interested in curing it because that's how they make money. And, I've had shoulder injuries from playing tennis. I had an ACL, a minor ACL tear on my right knee, and I've blown out 2 of the discs in my lumbar spine. Well, guess what? I help people with skin conditions. I help people with sports injuries and persistent pain. But I've been through it myself, and I've learned through going through the pain. Right? They've taught me some great lessons. So my back injury, which is by far the most serious injury I've had, even though I'd been helping people rehabilitate from that exact injury for a couple of decades, when I had the injury myself, I learned more going through the process of the person being injured than I did from all of my training. Right. And it just made me so much of a better practitioner. But had I not been through that experience myself, I wouldn't have that knowledge. It's not knowledge that you can buy. Going through that experience, that struggle. And it was awful. It was awful. But I look back now and say, what a blessing that was. Because, and now I can be more authentic. Because it's all well and good. It's all well and good saying to someone, oh yeah, I appreciate how you feel. But if you've never ruptured your discs in your lumbar spine, how do you know what that actually feels like? You know?
I don't think you can learn intuition from a book.
Absolutely.
Right? Intuition and empathy. I think you can kind of learn empathy from a book. You can learn how to try to practice it. But yeah, you can't. I used to play a lot of video games when I was younger. And at the time, the internet was not what the internet is today. So if you got stuck on a level, you used to have to go buy like a guidebook. And the whole premise of the guidebook was either the developer of the game or somebody who went through and beat the game is basically saying, this is how you get through level 4. You know that moat on level 5? Yeah, it's not what you think. This is what you have to do. But that's all based on the fact that they know how to get to the next level. If I wrote the book, it might get to the end of the first level, and then it might be like, I don't know what to do from here. You're going to have to go buy another book. So yeah, I think your point is very well landed and 100% accurate.
Yeah. Another challenge that a lot of people have is finding that their life's purpose. You know, I see this all the time in my practice. What advice would you give someone who wishes to find their life's purpose?
I would sit down and I would get very clear on the fact that I think many of us do understand our purpose. We just don't understand the vehicle. The purpose most likely is to improve something in some way, shape, or form for some person. And if you think about it, I mean, that's kind of what everything is. Everything is kind of that. That's that process. Where I think a lot of us get tied up is we say, but I don't know how to do it. I don't know how to make money doing it. And I don't know how to make it my future. And that becomes the vehicle. So just as an example, long before I was a podcaster or a speaker, any of that, I was coaching people on Snapchat because I would post positive things and people would ask me questions. I loved that. I've always loved helping people. It wasn't till I was interviewed on a podcast, we finished the episode, and I said to my friend, imagine if you could do that for a living. And he said, well, there's people that do. Vehicle has been shown to me. Okay, awesome. So there's a couple questions you can ask. What would I find you talking about with the people closest to you on a Friday night? I'm always talking about improvement and ego. Last night, my wife and I had a beautiful conversation about my exiles and all that stuff. So that's something you might find me talking about. What makes you so incredibly sad that you can't move forward with your day without addressing it? Someone I know went to the Great Barrier Reef and found out the Great Barrier Reef was closer to a Great Barrier Cemetery. And that changed the way they did everything in terms of being more environmentally conscious. That's a big one. What if people told you without asking that you're really good at? What's something you lose track of time when you're doing? Right? I have no idea what time it is right now. It could be any time, could be nighttime. Those are questions you can ask. But I really think the thought behind it that has shifted the most for me and helped me the most is your purpose is what you're doing. Your vehicle is how you deliver it to the world. You have to believe deeply in the vehicle or it'll never seem realistic. If you want to clean up the beaches, that's the thing. I want to clean up the beaches. Every time I go to the beach, there's cigarettes and there's Solo cups. It's just a mess. But how could I do it sustainably? How could I ever make money doing it? And where do I start? I think that's the vehicle. So that's what I would say. I would flip the script a little bit and say, I think a lot of us have a closer understanding of our purpose than we realize. We just don't necessarily know what the sustainable vehicle that will create the change and success we want is yet.
Yeah, that's an interesting way of looking at it. And I do see that a lot in my own practice, that people, they really enjoy doing something, but they just simply can't imagine in their own head how they could make that into a living. But I do feel I also get people that are just completely lost. Right. So, the first thing I do when I work with clients, the first session, and this is almost everybody, is I call it a goal setting session, because I need to know what destination they want to arrive at for me to help me get them there. Right. It's like, if you got in a taxi and the taxi says, well, where do you want to go? And they said anywhere. The taxi driver is going to be a bit confused and wouldn't really know which direction to go in. Right.
Yeah.
But if you said a specific location, then it's like, oh, okay, And then there might be different routes to get there. But I do find that there are some people that are just completely, they've just got no idea. Amir was a 42-year-old professional man suffering from acne. He was overweight, suffering from low confidence, and he had very low energy levels when he first came to see me. He was also spending £400 per month on products to cover up his acne. His skin was very oily, his face and scalp were covered in acne, and he worried that it might start to affect his work. Amir was a sugar lover, and it took him some time to wean himself off of sugar. But slowly over time, Amir made the necessary changes. Upon testing his gut microbiome, it was discovered that he did have a minor imbalance of gut microbes, including Staphylococcus aureus, which is often linked to skin conditions. He had hormonal imbalances, which would have affected his energy levels, and a number of food sensitivities that may have been causing his acne. Amir was also given supplementation to help rebalance his gut microbiome and his hormones. And within a few weeks, his skin improved to the point where he had clear skin for the first time in 30 years. If you would like to achieve the same kind of result as Amir, you can now follow a comprehensive step-by-step guide in my brand new book, Eliminating Adult Acne for Good, available now from all major online bookstores and via my website at www.bodycheck.co.uk/books. And have you got any views on that?
Yeah, that usually starts as like an identity level conversation of many of the people that I've worked with that didn't know where they wanted to go. They didn't believe in themselves. I don't know. I've worked with a lot of people who have very, very, very high self-belief, it's real self-belief. And they're usually just taking a bunch of shots. So they end up landing somewhere that they find is best for them. Where someone who doesn't have that level of belief in themselves, they almost overthink to the point where they don't try. So there's, if you think of it from like ready, aim, fire, it's kind of a balanced awareness implementation strategy. But there's also aim, fire, there's ready, 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 aim, fire. I think if you fall in that ready, 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 aim, fire category, you might not have the belief to even admit what you do want. Because I've had that conversation with people where they'll say, I want to be a speaker like you. And my next question is, okay, on a scale of 1 to 10, how much do you believe you could be a speaker like me? And they say like 0. It's like, okay, well, that's what I felt in the beginning too. So it doesn't mean you can't start. So I think that becomes the problem, Lee, is it's almost like we have to first plant a seed in what we think the purpose is. And if you don't ever plant a seed, it's going to be really hard to find your purpose unless we just come across a plant that sprouted fully. And the odds of that are pretty low. So I think that it's a belief thing. It's either going back to the low self-belief or low self-worth. I don't think it's possible for me, nor do I think I deserve that type of life. I'm not going to plant any seeds. Where someone who is very confident and believes they deserve a fulfilling, successful life, they might plant a bunch of random seeds and then happen upon one as it grows.
Yeah, I mean, I can think back to my own story to about, well, this would have been in the 90s, at some point, early to mid 90s. And I left school in 87, and I just got a job to earn money, where I just thought, I just need to earn money. I didn't really think too much about what I wanted to do. Although, interestingly, when I was at school, there were 2 jobs that I kind of thought I might enjoy. One was a PE teacher, right? Because I'm really sporty, and I thought, yeah, that would probably be quite a cool job. Spend lots of time in the sun, and it seems like quite an easy job, and it's sport, and I'd enjoy it. But then going back to what you said, but they don't earn much money, right? So that really put a stop to that. That was like, yeah, that's not happening. And the other thing, I quite like when at school, I really enjoyed technical drawing. So I thought, oh, maybe an architect. For whatever reason, I never really followed it up. But what was interesting, I had a number of jobs, office jobs, and they were okay. The first ever job I had was the most stressful job ever, but that's another whole story. So I had a number of office jobs. None of them really fulfilled me, but I earned enough money to, buy clothes and go clubbing and play sport, as you do when you're young. And one day I was in the office. The company had kind of changed in terms of, they changed all the departments. Now things were working. And I was made aware of this guy, and his job involved, for want of a better phrase, technical drawing mixed with IT. And I just studied IT at college. And I looked at him and thought, oh, that's my dream job. And it's quite well paid. And I thought, I want his job. And I just put it out there. I want his job. I want his job. And interestingly, he kept going off sick with stress. And I'm thinking, how is he stressed from doing that job? Like, that's ridiculous. And then after, I can't remember how long it was. It might have been a year. They said, look, you're never here. We need to get someone else in to do this job. And because the people that worked in that office knew my background, they said, oh, do you want the job? So I started the job and I loved it. Absolutely loved the job. It was good money. I really enjoyed the job. And then after a short period of time, I got a new boss, and then things started to change dramatically. And he was getting me to do accountancy work, which I didn't really want to do. I wanted to do the technical drawing stuff, which is all now done on computer by that stage. Windows hadn't come out yet, but Windows came out whilst I was in that job. And so I was really enjoying that job. But then I was also working out in a gym across the road. This was in central London. And it was the first time I'd come across what was called personal trainers, right? They just didn't exist before then, right? So obviously when I was at school, they didn't exist. Otherwise, that probably would have been my route. And I used to read all the magazines back in the day. And I'm someone that when I do something, I do it properly, or I just don't do it at all. So I got to know a couple of the trainers, and I'd quite often sit and have dinner with them after I had my workout. And we'd be sitting there and we'd be talking, and they'd say, how do you know all this stuff? Like, we've got sports science degrees from the top university in England. And like, you're talking like you were in class with us. How do you know all this stuff? And I just like reading. And they said to me, have you ever thought about being a personal trainer? And that just hit me like a light bulb. It was like, or like a lightning bolt. It was like, what? I can make a living from spending time in a gym? And it's almost like I almost went back to when I was at school thinking, I quite like to be a PE teacher, but I can't make any money from it. And these guys in this gym, this was in the very early days of personal training, they were making really good money. They weren't even paying rent to the gym. They were just pocketing their money. And that for me was where I really found my life's purpose. And I don't even feel like I was necessarily looking for it, but looking back, if perhaps the new boss that I got, that I didn't get on very well with at all, and he was getting me to do stuff I wouldn't really like doing. If I hadn't have come across that situation, maybe it wouldn't have been such a light bulb moment. So I think, the world moves in mysterious ways, and sometimes you have to really listen for that light bulb moment, or that lightning bolt moment to happen.
Yeah, it was the same for me. When I was in high school, podcasting wasn't even a thing. So I never planned on doing this. I didn't want to do any of this, but this is another really good question. I'm sure you've heard if I gave you $1 million, like this used to be a question that a lot of people would ask when it comes to finding your purpose. If I gave you $1 million and you could do anything, what would it be? I used to try that question until I got sip margaritas on the beach. And I was like, well, that can't be your purpose. That's not going to lead to a deeply meaningful life.
Yeah.
If you never had to worry about money again, but you had to do something in the service of others or the world, what would it be? I love that. Because it's almost like, what are you willing to do for free just because it fulfills you?
Yeah.
And I podcasted for free in the very beginning, not even in the beginning, most of the time. It was completely free. I've coached for free. I think that's a really good question too. If you can not over intellectualize it, I think it's a good question.
Absolutely. I mean, I've often thought that myself, the number's normally a bit more than 1 million though. But, if I won the the Euro Millions lottery, right? It's normally like, 79 million euros or whatever it is. What would I do differently? I would still do what I'm doing now. I would just be paying more people to help me.
Yeah.
That would be the only difference. And it would be better, right? Because at the moment, yes, I have some people do some of the things for me, but I can't do everything myself better than other people, right? There are some people that do specific things better than I can, and I'd rather pay them to do it, and then you're providing a better service, and then I've got more time to focus on what I'm best at.
Yep.
I would also buy a massive farm as well.
Well, there's nothing wrong with that, my friend. There's nothing wrong with that.
Moving on, confidence seems to be a quality that many people lack. I know we've spoken a little bit about it earlier. How can people become more confident?
Maybe the opposite of what you're used to hearing. And again, this has worked for me, and this is just the experience that we've used. Set smaller goals. I know it seems maybe the opposite, but I believe one of the reasons we struggle when it comes to confidence is we are told that if your goals don't scare you, they're not big enough. If you lack confidence, you're already scared by setting goals, never mind the size of the goal. So I would say if you have let's just say you have a level 1 confidence, you don't think that much is possible for you. I would argue that you're wrong, most likely. I throw that out there. But I would say set a level 1.5 or level 2 goal, not a level 8 goal. Your brain knows if you don't believe in what you're saying. I'm going to be a bajillionaire. My brain is like, no, you're not. Not only has that never happened, it's not going to be you. Okay, point taken. So that's really what's worked really well is if you think about it from the perspective of at the beginning of the year, and think of this cycle. At the beginning of the year, at least in the US, a lot of people do New Year's resolutions. So we use a date to motivate us to set a goal that we might not even benefit from setting. So let's just say hypothetically, it's the new year and I say, I'm going to lose 52 pounds this week. I'm going to lose a pound a week. That is a very, very, very large goal if I've never been to the gym before. I think a more appropriate, sustainable, motivational goal would be I am going to the gym. I'm going to go to the gym 3 times a week the first week of New Year's. And then we reset. I'm going to go to the gym 3 times next week. And then 3 times and I'm going to track my calories, or 3 times and I'm going to weigh myself, or whatever. I would say be very, very, very humble in the fact that you don't have a large level of confidence yet, and set your goals accordingly. Set a goal that you believe you can accomplish with 100% of yourself. Don't set a 3% goal that is going to stretch you way beyond your comfort zone into the point where you don't actually take action. I think that's it in a nutshell. I'm convinced almost anybody would be as confident as I am as a podcaster if they did as many episodes as I did. I've just done so many episodes. I'm nothing special. I've just kept going and kept going. But you have to understand that I started in my business partner's mother's basement, and we just try to get a little bit better, a little bit better, a little bit better. If you took Kevin from 6 years ago and put him in this moment right now, I would not have the confidence to do this. For certain, 0 questions asked. But I just set a lot of small goals along the way, and then I tried to make sure I gave myself credit for actually succeeding there. So it really is that. Don't try to get to the point where you don't have any fear. Everything is easy. You're not afraid of judgment. You're not afraid of failure. You're not afraid of rejection. I don't think that's sustainable. I would say set a goal that is just a little bit outside of your competence and comfort zone. Then we can compound on that. And going back to the importance of consistency, confidence is built through consistency, through self-trust, through self-proof. Start small, and big things will happen eventually.
Yeah, so what you're saying is success builds confidence. And by setting goals that you're most likely to achieve, that's going to build more confidence. And then you can say, right, now I can build on that and maybe add to the goal. And the other thing that was quite interesting, you first mentioned an outcome goal, so losing 50 pounds. And then the second one was a process goal, which was, well, I'll get to the gym 3 times a week.
Yeah.
And I do think it is important to have both, because you could set the goal of, well, I'm going to go to the gym 3 times a week, which is a process goal. But if there's no outcome, what's the motivation for the process?
Yeah.
So you definitely need both of those things. The other thing that interests me as well is you've got confidence and then you've got motivation, right? So what you were saying was make sure that the goal is relatively easy to accomplish, because then that will increase your likelihood of success, which can build confidence. But then some people would say that if the goal's too easy, you might lack motivation to achieve it. What would you say to that?
If you're very honest with yourself and you are motivated by becoming more confident, it's almost like you have to trick yourself into it. It's you're not doing it because you're motivated to do it. You're doing it because you're motivated by what will happen if you don't do it. Most humans are more motivated by the lack or losing something they are of gaining something. Yeah. So I would say that's one of those times where we allow our egos to win the battle. It's like, well, yeah, that's not really going to do it for me. That's not that big of a deal. I think that's when we have to tap into humility. When you're a kid and you learn to ride a bike, you learn with training wheels. One of the reasons, and I don't know if there's ever been any studies on this, I don't know, but I'm willing to bet one of the reasons that people maybe later in life don't learn to ride a bike if they haven't learned is because they're afraid to use training wheels. They're not humble enough to say, I've never done this before, and the last thing I want to do is do a header over the handlebars. Let me throw these things on here. Where if they had the humility to say, yeah, okay, let me try this, I think they come up. Same with swimming.
Yeah, I was thinking
someone who's right, someone who's never learned to swim. When you're a kid, you love your floaties. You're all about them. But when you're 36 years old, maybe you are afraid of the judgment and you're not humble enough to say, I don't really know what I'm doing yet. So yeah, I would say it's one of those things where maybe it doesn't motivate you. So maybe it doesn't. That's always a possibility. Try to set a larger goal. Yeah. But if you don't do anything to get the goal, it's not because you're not motivated then. There's something else holding you back.
So whilst we're talking about confidence, why do you think it's important?
Man. Because if you don't have confidence, even if you do achieve a certain level of success, you'll never feel like you actually live there. You'll feel like an imposter. You'll feel like you don't deserve it. We've talked about that a lot. You'll feel like you don't belong there. You'll feel like a fraud. You'll feel like you're faking it. Those are all really, really big things. And then I think it's important because you can almost say, I am going to do X. And then when you do X, it rebuilds confidence. So it's called state and prove. I am going to do boom, and then I go do boom. For a lot of my life, Lee, I thought I got lucky. I was a really good baseball player, and every time I got a hit, I was like, all right, cool, I got lucky again. I got lucky pretty often, right? So that's not serving me. But if I went, I'll never forget this. When I was in Little League, I was probably like 10. I was up to bat with the bases loaded, and my mom yelled from the backstop. She said, if you hit a grand slam, I'll give you a $100 bill. And on the next pitch, I hit a grand slam. I didn't say I was going to hit a grand slam. My mom did. I didn't get the confidence. I should have said it, and it would have been state and then prove. If you don't have the confidence to state and prove, it's really hard to build that self-trust. Now, again, you could say that every single time and it may never happen, but it really is that. It's almost like I am going to go on this podcast today and I think I can do a really good job. State and then hopefully prove. Then when I go on my podcast right after this, I'm going to have that momentum of, well, the last one went pretty well, so I'm sure that this one's going to go as well as the last one did. So I think confidence gives you the ability to state and prove. And then here's the important piece. Actually say, I earned that. I said I was going to do it, and then I did it. Let me check that off as a win for today. Then tomorrow I'll look back and say, oh, I had 5 wins yesterday. I think that's a big piece of it too.
Yeah, I would, as you were talking, I was just thinking, what would my answer be to my question? And I would actually flip it and say, it's not so much why confidence is important, but why a lack of confidence is detrimental, right? Because if you're always lacking confidence, you're probably not going to actually try anything.
Yeah.
And then what are you going to achieve? Nothing.
Well, it perpetuates the cycle.
Yeah.
There's that, we call it the confidence conundrum. If you lack belief, you don't take action. If you don't take action, you don't get meaningful results and or feedback. If you don't get that, you don't learn a new lesson. And then it just proves to you that, well, yeah, it's probably good that I didn't do it in the first place. But if you inject belief, say you borrow someone's belief, you might not think it's possible, but then you take action. When you take action, you're going to get some sort of feedback. When you get feedback, it's probably going to be a lesson that's going to help you build belief. And then next time, you're more willing to take the shot. It's just, one is like a stuck cycle. The other is an exponential growth cycle. And again, easier said than done, but I think that's a good example of what happens.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I certainly, again, I'm kind of thinking from my own perspective. You know, I'm someone, I'll just give something a go.
Yeah.
Right. You know, and I mean, obviously I've been on this planet for 54 years, so I've managed to do a lot of things. But even, it's a funny story. A few weeks ago, I went to visit a very good friend of mine. They live on the south coast in England. And he said, do you want to try paddleboarding? Because I'd never tried it before. And my first thought was, I don't know. It's not really something I've really thought about doing, not something I really got a passion for. But I thought, you know what? You got to try it, right? You got to try things in life. Why go through life without even trying? How would I know whether I enjoy it or not without giving it a go? So we're out on the sea, and he says, right, paddle out on your knees. And he said, when you get clear of the shore, try and stand up and then, you know, try and paddle around. So first of all, I got stuck in the seaweed. That was the first thing. And then he managed to free me, and I got a little bit further out. I thought, right, let's try and stand up. So I tried to stand up. A wave hit the board. Bang! I'm in the water. Okay, let's try again. Stand up. A wave hits the board. I fall into the water. Okay, no problem. I'll try again. And I'm like, right, I'm really determined this time, because I think my friend said, it took me 3 times before I could stand up. So I thought, right, if this is the 3rd time, I'm going to really do it now. So I tried to stand up. Same thing. I fall. This time, as I fall, I twist and I land. So I hit the board on my way down. Again, I thought, okay, no problem. I'll get back on. And I looked down and something doesn't quite look right. And I've like split my whole chest open. So I ended up going to hospital. So the moral of that story was I tried it. And would I try it again? I probably would. I'd probably try it again, even though I didn't get anywhere. But life is short, right? Life is short. So if you don't try things you've never done before, how do you know whether you're going to enjoy it or not?
Are you more or less confident that if you tried it again, you could do it?
More confident.
More confident.
Yeah. Because I had 3. I mean, I think the 3rd time I was up. And again, it wasn't until a wave hit me. If I did it in water that was a bit more calm, I think I would have been fine anyway.
Yeah.
Probably would have been fine the first time, because obviously the thing's moving constantly.
Yeah. That's a good lesson.
Yeah.
That's a good lesson.
Yeah, it's a good lesson. And it's not like, I mean, I do stuff in the gym that's on unstable environments. It's not like I'm completely new to that idea. But yeah, that was an interesting story of giving something a go, even though it didn't have a good outcome. It still hasn't really put me off. It was a freak. I mean, it was a freak accident. Like even till today, those were there still can't work out how I actually caused the damage that I did. But again, it was no big deal. I mean, I've healed now. It's no big deal.
It's a good lesson. It's a very appropriate lesson for what we've been talking about.
Yeah, and it, you were talking about training wheels on a bike, right? I mean, okay, there's no training wheels to being on a paddleboard, but like if you didn't have training wheels on a bike, you've got to get used to falling off before you actually learn how to ride the bike, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I remember learning to ride a bike, and we call them stabilizers in the UK, not training wheels, but we know what you mean.
Good to know.
Obviously, you start with one on both sides, right? On each side. And then when you get a bit of confidence, you take one of them off on one of the sides. And now you've only got a stabilizer or a training wheel on one side. So what do? Well, you fall off the one on the side that doesn't have the stabilizer. But eventually you get good enough and you can take the stabilizers off and you're pretty much done for life. You can, I mean, I've not ridden a bike for a very long time, but I'm pretty damn confident I could just jump on a bike and ride, right?
Same, yeah. It's been a long time though. It's been a long time.
Yeah, mine's probably 40 years.
Oh, you got me beat.
I don't think you can count the ones in the gym.
Yeah, no, those don't count. Those don't go anywhere.
So, moving on from my story, and it's kind of linked in one way. What would you say is your biggest fear?
This is a very new, as of last night, understanding. Again, we do a lot of self-work. My biggest fear internally is disappointing someone. I have a wild fear of somebody, and this is just an example, somebody meeting me and saying, I really thought he was going to be more blank in person. I thought he was going to be more caring. I thought he was going to be more whatever, in shape. I'm not going to be taller. If you ever meet me in person, I'll just say that right now. You will be disappointed if you think I'm 6 feet. That's something that I'm really, really working on. So that's an internal one. If we were going to say like external and funny, I am terrified of planes and I am terrified of sharks. Those are my two like external ones. Eventually I'll go shark diving in a cage, and I do take planes fairly often. So I've really worked my way up to that. But internally, rejection was the biggest one for a long time. That's kind of gone away as I've gotten rejected so many times over the last 5 years. But disappointing.
I would imagine rejection must also be linked back to your experience with your dad.
I would argue that that's kind of where the reason I always start with low self-worth and low self-belief is because that's where I was. And I think a big piece of that is I'm not good enough to have my dad stay around. Even though logically you can I mean, I was a baby. Yeah. I didn't say anything. I didn't know. I was a baby.
Yeah.
But emotionally it's like, abandoned. When you get abandoned, I think it's really hard to feel worthy and feel like you can believe in yourself. So yeah, I would argue most of my traumas probably come from that. Yeah.
So you're saying rejection is probably did you say your biggest fear or one of your biggest fears?
It used to be the biggest, bar none.
Yeah.
But the lesson in that for me is, for many of us, fear is a fence. And we walk up to it and say, I can't go on the other side of this fence. When in reality, that is the antidote. Exposure therapy. You just have to expose yourself to the things that you're scared of at the right micro doses, and then you can overcome that. So now I get rejected fairly often, just being a business owner and being in sales and being an entrepreneur. So that doesn't bother me nearly as much. I would say the disappointment thing is, that is something that now I'm connecting dots to years ago. And it's like, oh, that's kind of been running my life in a very strange way.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. You know what most people's number one fear is?
Public speaking?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I remember when I was at university, so I would have been in my early 20s, and I was studying management at university. And every week we would be asked to work on a project, and we'd have to present what we'd done that week to the rest of the class. And I knew that the only way to get over that was to make sure that I was the first one up every week to present to the class. So literally, I was sitting there in the class waiting for the teacher to say, right, who would, and my arm would be up, right? And I would be the first one up every week. And I knew every week I would get better and I would get more confident because I was being consistent, right? And by the end of, so that was a 2-year post-grad course. By the end of 2 years, I was completely comfortable public speaking.
Yeah. And
so I started my work in health and fitness in 1996, but I started as an educator in the field in 98, and I have been ever since. And I've spoken at conferences with hundreds of people, and for me, it's like I'm talking to you now. Right? I would do it all day, every day. I love speaking to large audiences, right? And But I know that most people would find that absolutely terrifying to speak. Even a crowd of, say 12 people. Right? I often teach classes with maybe 8 to 12 people in it. And I know a lot of people would find that really, really frightening.
Yeah.
But I love it. And in fact, the bigger the audience, the more I enjoy it.
Yeah.
Strangely enough. But I would say in my life, I mean, again, it's a cheesy saying, but I love it. Feel the fear and do it anyway.
Yeah.
I feel I'm a real risk taker, which is interesting because my mother is the complete opposite. And whenever I've done things, she always gets really concerned that I'm going to fail. Like when I changed careers from working in an office, pretty well paid, to, I was a personal trainer in 96. I went from earning a good salary, and I had a mortgage at the time, to earning nothing. Literally the next day, nothing, no business, nothing. Right? But something deep inside me, I had the confidence I was going to make it work.
Yep.
Right? And for years, I was, I had to work really long hours because I was on really low hourly rates, right? Initially, back in the 90s, cleaners nowadays get more money than I was earning then. So I had to work very, very long hours to keep a roof over my head. But again, I had the confidence and I had the consistency. And, when you're seeing, I was probably working with between 50 and 20 clients a week, and I was probably doing between 35 and 40 hours a week. Again, there's that consistency. That's when you learn how to really do a job.
Yeah.
Right? And that builds your confidence.
Yeah. A great question, if even like speaking to the power of consistency, is if somebody tells you they've been doing something for 20 years, cool, like that's awesome. But how many times do you do it a year though?
Yeah.
Right? Because there's a big, let's just say I go to a football game once a year for 20 years versus I played football 3 times a week, every week for 20 years. That's a drastic difference in consistency.
Yeah.
So that's a really good layer as well.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's interesting. The guy, I play tennis most weeks against the same guy. I generally play once, maybe twice a week. Well, singles, I'll play once a week. And he plays 5 to 7 times a week. So I'll let you work out who generally wins. But
I would have a guess.
But then I always like playing against someone that's slightly better than me.
Yeah.
That's how I get better, right?
Yeah, 100%.
Awesome. So, Kevin, it's been really great talking to you, but what's next for you?
More of the same. Yeah, more of the same. This is always a challenging question because I feel very privileged with the level of clarity I have in my life. So right now we do an episode every day. We're going to keep doing that. Just continuing to add value, continuing to be creative in ways to grow, and continuing to try to help people get to the next level. Very, very much the same. It's like Groundhog Day over here.
Yeah. Do you want to give a shout out to the name of your podcast?
Yeah, it's called Next Level University. We're on all the platforms as well as YouTube, and we drop a new episode every single day, audio and video.
Awesome. And where can people find you online?
The best place is probably Instagram. My handle is @NeverQuitKid. I do my own Instagram, so questions, comments, concerns, anything you need, I'm always just a message away. Awesome.
And I'll make sure all those details are in the show notes as well.
Thank you, Lee. Thank you.
Kevin, thank you so much. I've really, really enjoyed this conversation with you.
Likewise, my friend. I feel like I learned a ton about you, and I appreciate that opportunity.
Oh, that's awesome. So that's all from Kevin and me for this week. But don't forget, you can join me same time, same place next week on the Radical Health Rebel podcast. Thanks for tuning in. Remember to give the show a rating and a review, and I'll see you next time.